Hello, everyone. I'm Jim Daniels, your co host for this latest in our Digital Badge Academy web series. And I'm here with fellow co host and colleague David Leaser.
And today we have a really exciting training for you on the 25 secrets of successful digital credentialing. And Jim Daniels has put together a really great infographic. It's a cheat sheet for you, but we thought we should walk you through it and give you a little more detail so it can be a perfect guide for you. So Jim, let's kick it off. Let's get
Okay.
started.
Yeah. And we're just going to keep this kind of casual. We're going to go through and they're, and these 25 things, by the way, these 25 secrets, I've arranged them somewhat in a sequence that you would typically encounter them if you're going to go out and embark on creating a digital credentialing program using badging. At the same time, it's not intended to be a full reflection of the 5-step process that we've perfected as part of what we do at Digital Badge Academy. But every element in here is fits somewhere within one of those 5 steps. So I just wanted to add that clarity to this. So we're just going to run through them. They're 25. This is going to be pretty rapid progression of things because we're going to try and keep this to no more than 30 or 40 minutes. So we'll jump right in. So, number one item that I have always seen that has existed in all successful digital badging programs is programs that really have a well defined goal and purpose. And simply what I mean by that is just, spending time up front to define what your objectives are for the program, understand what it's going to be in service of. And David, I know you are a big believer in this as well.
Well, I think that's a big problem. I think people create solutions in search of a problem instead of a problem that has a solution. And I think you really have to, like you said, you have to start out with what do we want to get out of this program, and who do we want to influence with it as well.
Right.
And I think that early on, when we were developing the IBM Digital Badge Program, we maybe didn't really realize that. We thought, hey, let's just put badges on things, and maybe we'll get social media impressions.
That's
But
true.
but it turned out that in order to get the buy-in that we needed and to sustain the program, and I think that's the big thing, is that it has to tie to the business objectives for earners, for issuers, and for the consumers.
Right. That was a very quick lesson that we learned, and it actually became part of the whole governance model of the IBM program. And again, you'll see it as part of the governance model of any successful digital credentialing program, where if you want to apply a badge to something for recognition, you have to understand, okay, what's the purpose of this? What do you intend to achieve? So that's a big one. And that is, I know in our process that we always start there with clients, and we have to get that out of the way before we move on. Speaking of moving on, let's talk about number two, and that is target audience. What are the different kinds of opportunities that are out there in terms of target audience, and how do you go about identifying those target audiences? And
Yeah, I think and that's an important one as well. And really, literally, what where's your focus? Is it on students? Is it on business partners? Is it on internal employees? So who are the people that you're gonna? So you really have to do some persona work here, right, Jim? I mean, that's really what that's
absolutely,
about.
that's exactly what it gets to. It's really understanding personas that you're going to be working with and issuing badges to, creating credentials around, and really understanding what kind of needs they have as well.
And we even got down to the level of developing personas to saying, let's write it down on a piece of paper. It doesn't have to be fancy, but really
Exactly.
say, here's what they are, and put down like Susie is a student who graduated from a community college. She needs to enhance her skills by doing X or whatever it happens to be.
So number three, badge criteria. And this, I've put this one kind of early on because I think it's important to at least start the thought process around this before you get too far into the development side of things. And it kind of, badge criteria, it's a good place to introduce it because you're already thinking about, your goal and purpose, and you've got purpose in place. You've looking at your target audience, understanding what their needs are. Now it's time to set really clear criteria.
I think that's a really important one for a lot of reasons. First of all, it's going to feed the metadata that you need later. But I think if you don't have a clear, crisp understanding of what it takes to earn this badge, and you don't have it written down, because that information, by the way, will need to flow onto any external websites. It'll need to flow into like your badges, and if you really want to have interoperability with your badges, maybe with another organization, a college, whatever it happens to be, they're going to need to know very specifically what did it take to earn this badge.
Absolutely. And it's all about making sure, you've got enough information in the way of criteria there and solid criteria so that it ends up being a meaningful accomplishment, reflected within that credential. Badge design, and this is an interesting one. I know we could spend a whole lot of time here. Obviously, we're not going to, but um, badge visual design matters. I think that's the key takeaway here. If you're going to have some sort of visual representation, we'll call it eye candy. Maybe it's all for vanity's sake. Technically, you really don't even need a badge visual. In fact, the latest Open Badges standards 3.0 uh, allows you to actually create digital credentials without even including a badge emblem. But that being said, I think by and large, most everybody wants to have some sort of emblem. It's definitely a way to capture someone's attention visually. And I think it's really important if you're going to do that to have something that is truly eye catching, right? That it reflects your brand as an organization, as an issuer, and is something that has visual appeal to those who would actually come in and engage with the activity that's attached to.
And even the name of the badge or the name of the activity is going to be expressed in that design. And it'll make a big difference because if we found early on, if you had a badge that says, that describes somebody as a beginner, very different than saying that they have foundational knowledge of something. So which one is the badge earner going to want to share with other people? And which one is going to build the most trust? So think about how do these badges build trust? Which ones are going to be shared the most? Which one is going to accurately reflect what happened to get that badge?
Yeah, absolutely. And we go into a lot of depth on badge visual design, or what we call badge visual design language, in our master class. And there's a whole process that you can follow. If you want to learn more, you can do that. You can go there and look at our master class. Number 5, issuer and authority. And this really gets to the topic of credibility. If you're going to have credible digital credentials out in the ecosystem, you need to, it also gets to the topic of governance as well. You want to make sure that there is some degree of authority in how these digital credentials are created, how they get approved for being created to begin with, right? And also how you go about issuing them. So I think issuer, making sure that if, like let's look at the IBM badging program, right? There were over 230 uh, individual digital badging programs that existed.
One of the things about badge authority, I think, is making sure you write down very clearly what was the authority behind this badge? What did it take for you to be able to develop this badge? Because that information can either go into the metadata or can be used on your badge landing page. So I think you need to make sure that you really write it, document down what it is. Another way to build authority, though, with badges is also to collaborate with somebody else. So if you know of another organization that you're co-creating with, say there's a very trusted brand. Maybe it's a college, maybe it's another industry, maybe it's an industry association. If you have an opportunity to work with them, get their endorsement, or even do a co-branded badge, that will increase your authority.
Number 6, technology and platform. And this is something that I think you and I both will agree on this, that most folks, when they're starting out, they're not that focused on the technology and platform side of it. And more specifically, is the system that they end up using to facilitate and look after their digital badging program, is it user friendly? And does it have all the features and the functionality that's really needed to create a really compelling user experience? And that user experience is not just for the person who's earning these digital credentials and collecting these badges and and adding them into their profile, but is it user friendly for the issuer of those credentials as well as the consumer of those credentials?
Yeah, and I think once early on, start listing your requirements. Get a small group of people, in your organization to help you define what are the requirements for you. Is it heavy on the reporting? Is it on interoperability with other systems, perhaps, your learning management systems? Is there a need to have APIs that connect this to an HR system? There's a lot of different things that you can think about, but start writing them down. You're not going to know everything at once. Then after you do that, interview all the these companies that are issuing badges, the Accreditables and Credleys and certifiers and navigators, these groups, to get demos of them, and then start writing down what their capabilities are and see if those are on your checklist. That's the best way to do this.
Integration and interoperability, I think, are really key here. And I know one of the things that we've seen, and we did the investigation, we did the analysis back years ago when we got together and started evaluating what kind of platform we were going to utilize to get the IBM badge program off the ground. We very quickly determined that, we went through the build versus buy analysis. That was something you led, actually. And we very quickly realized that building it and trying to maintain something, either proprietary or, 100% in-house was not the way to go. And there are a lot of compelling reasons. That's it. Again, that could be a whole nother topic, but we'll end it right there on technology and platform. Number 7, metadata and evidence. So this in some ways relates to number 5, issuer and authority, or at least it's an extension of issuer and authority, and that's making sure that you have really sound metadata and evidence-based information that's included in the badge itself for this digital credential. It also helps establish transparency, and that's really key. Again, if you want to have a credible program, there has to be transparency, and that metadata has to be structured and written in such a way that it's easily understandable.
Yeah, and I think that most people overlook this for whatever reason. It's the most important part of the badge, truly, because this data not only helps people understand, is this have an equivalence to some other badge, or can it be used interoperably with some other type of program? But when you really get down to it, all of that metadata is going to feed your skills cloud in your organization. And if you
Mm-hmm.
don't have that information in the metadata, you're not going to be able to build a really robust skills cloud.
Well, that's exactly right, and that gets to the key element of consistency within the metadata. And there is a bit of a science and method in how you structure the metadata, how you author or write a description, how you structure the earning criteria information. All that's really important so that, I mean, these digital credential, obviously by its very nature, is machine readable. But at the same time, if you have a few hundred or even a few thousand of these credentials in your ecosystem, you want to have some degree of consistency. And again, it gets to exactly what you just mentioned there. Number 8, and this is kind of a newer thing that we're starting to see, at least in terms of being supported by the platforms that are commercially available. But that's badge pathways. Now, badge pathways are something that has existed for as long as I've been involved in digital credentialing using, badges and the open badge standard. But as far as having actual rules engines and things of that nature built into like the commercial platforms, for instance, that's only more recently started to emerge. But the concept of pathways themselves have already been there. And that's really important so that there's a sense of progression. So there's an entry point and a pathway that someone can follow and incrementally along the way be rewarded for their efforts, by earning a badge for having, hit a specific milestone, for instance.
Well, one of the things that we learned as well is that once we started developing badges, we did them in classifications. It goes back to the design, right? That we have knowledge badges, which are basically, read the book and take the exam and you understand it, or skills badges, which means really you can apply that. We went further than that, of course. But what happened early on with the IBM program was one of the leaders at IBM came to us and said, how can you have all these knowledge badges and you don't have very many skills badges? What are you doing about that? And like, we turned the tables on. We said, "What are you doing about that?" Because
Right.
what it exposed was that there were not enough skills activities to even earn badges at IBM. So it led to the development of much more robust programs at IBM to say, let's progress this from knowledge to skills. And I think that you're going to find that when you start to develop these pathways, you're going to start seeing where your gaps are.
So number 9, endorsement and recognition. I don't want to go as far as to say that this is in every successful digital credentialing program that I've seen. I've seen very successful programs that don't have an endorsement element, but those that do are on a whole nother plane from terms of just the overall impact that that program has. And I think it's something that anyone creating a credentialing program around needs to look into the possibility of having an endorsement authority included as part of that credential that's been created.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that's starting to emerge, and I think it's fairly important for organizations, is expanding the value of a badge beyond just the activities in your organization. And one way that what we did was getting college credit for badges. So we did a number of different things, working with really forward-thinking groups like Northeastern University and ACE to say, can we get some sort of college credit for our badges, or at least some sort of recognition of the amount of credit that they're worth. And I think that's something you should explore because that way it really compels people to join your badge program.
Yeah, and those are great examples, in the particularly in the education space and having the ability to, attach that kind of endorsement to your credentials. And I think any employer out there that has any kind of program where it intersects with higher education, for instance, maybe it's a local community college, for instance, that they have an arrangement with to develop a pipeline of talent. There's a great opportunity to build endorsement into your credentials for programs like that. So number 10, and this is kind of an extension to number 1, goal and purpose, but number 10 is alignment to goals. So we've gone through, we've hit all these other elements. Now, what are we doing to make sure that we have all of these badges align with those goals? What are the governance elements that ensure that happens every time a new request comes through to ensure that that badge that gets created, whatever kind of credential that it's representing, does it align to those to the goal and purpose of the overall program? And that's kind of a governance element, or fits into the governance side of things in terms of the overall architecture and framework of a program. But again, all successful programs have that process in place where anything that comes through that's new before it gets published, that there is a way to ensure that it aligns with the overall goal and purpose of the programs. So alignment to goals.
Yeah, and I think you have to ask yourself the question, what is this in service of? What do we get out of it? What's the big so what on it? And by the way, that's going to change, right? It could change from month to month or year to year or over a period of time because nobody's standing still. So you have to
Exactly.
constantly revisit that.
Number 11, assessment and evaluation. You have to give a decent amount of thought and put a decent amount of planning into the process of looking at how you're assessing someone's achievement that they're going to be recognized for through a digital credential. Any kind of credential. This doesn't even apply necessarily just to digital credentials. It's no different that, if someone's going to earn a degree, obviously there's a, exhaustive multi-year assessment and evaluation process behind that. But even if it's something that's really discrete, representing a discrete skill in the way of a digital badge, you have to think about the assessment and evaluation side of it.
Yeah, and I think the big word here is evidence, right? Even if somebody does something, let's say they created some sort of portfolio on their own, or they created a YouTube video, or they, wrote an article or blog or whatever you feel is badge worthy, there needs to be evidence of that. And I think you also need to think about, how are you going to express that evidence? Are you going to express it within the badge? Are you going to do it on a landing page? I think it's important to have full transparency of what that evidence is.
All of these things, for that matter, that we're talking about, all tie back to credibility. Number 12, privacy and security. And this is an area that I have spent so much time on. That was really driven by the whole emergence of the GDPR, which is the European Union's approach to ensuring that individuals' data privacy is being handled in the right way. And that's kind of the lowest common denominator in some respects, is GDPR. But any program, and there's, again, this is a whole nother topic that, we could spend easily an hour and still not cover all the aspects of privacy and security of credentials. But you do have to think about how you handle individual credential earners' personal information. It's really important. And also the security side of it, making sure that, for instance, the verification logic that sits behind this, and this is really makes for a strong business case to look at the commercial platforms, because they've put a ton of effort into ensuring that data privacy and security in that is woven into the solutions that they provide. Really important, because if you don't pay attention to this, and depending on how far reaching your program is, especially if it's reaching an audience in the European Union, and you're not doing this correctly, your company could get in a ton of trouble.
Yeah, and here's a tip. Make sure you publish that privacy information up front. So even at the beginning of an activity, when somebody goes to do an activity that they're going to earn a badge, make sure that they know that when they earn that badge, here's what happens. Here's what happens with their data. Here's what's going to happen next. They're going to maybe be approached by a third party to issue the badge, all that stuff. So take your privacy information, make it public, and make sure you put it at the front end of the activity to earn the badge.
Number 13, accessibility and inclusivity. I think by and large, most of the activities that are represented by that digital credentialing program have accessibility and inclusivity built into them. But it's really important. Again, this kind of goes back to what platform are you going to be using to actually facilitate the creation and the issuing of digital credentials, and providing, wallets and profile capabilities for the earners, and all, that sort of thing. So thinking through particularly the accessibility piece, really important to make sure the platform you're using is sensitive to that. And then, of course, inclusivity, making sure all stakeholders within your organization, that there's no discrimination in how you're building your digital credentialing program, that it's, there's fair access to anything that you're wrapping a badge around.
Yeah, and I think, inherently, I think that's what badges are always, they're about, right? Is increasing
Mhm.
opportunities for people and making sure that everybody has elevates people. And I think that maybe that also requires a little bit of training too. And I think that in an organization, making sure that everybody knows how to use the program, how to issue badges, and some other things. So you may want to think about what type of, not heavy training, but brief, information to people to make sure that that the spirit of this comes through.
Yeah, and just to very quickly, to wrap an example around this, I can remember a circumstance at IBM where there was a group within IBM that represented accessibility and inclusivity, and specifically, they had some training activities that were wrapped around the topic of neurodiversity, and I had never even heard this term. And so as I started speaking with them and understanding what they were out focused on and what they thought about every day when they walked through the door, it was all about um, the considerations around folks that, have ADHD, or suffer from anxiety and things of this nature. And they're even visually, and this was probably the big eye opener for me, the design of the badge emblems, the visual design language as a result of this group surfacing and wanting to create badges, it literally influenced the design of the actual badge emblems at IBM to make them more compliant from a neurodiversity standpoint. So that's one example. Let's see, 14, marketing and promotion.
You really need to put together a marketing marcom plan. You have to put together a marcom plan and list who the target is, what the watering holes are for those people. Where do they actually get their information? What's the messages you're going to give them, and how are you going to give it to them and when? So, for example, when we were promoting programs, at IBM, but other companies we've done this with other companies as well. First of all, there are key stakeholders, key influencers in the organization. They're going to get a certain message. The people that are issuing the badges, they're going to get a certain message. The people who are earning the badges. I think this is very, very important because if you don't promote the big so what story to the people that are earning the badges, they're not going to claim the badges. They're not going to use the badges. They're not going to even know what to do with the badges. We found that we were issuing very valuable badges to certain groups, and they just weren't claiming them at all. And it turns out because those people didn't even have an understanding of what the value was. They often didn't even have LinkedIn profiles. They didn't have any kind of social media understanding of how this could help benefit them by creating really a social media presence for them. So I think you have to figure that out. One of the things we did also was we developed templates for a lot of this stuff. Some of it went into the early letters that went out to the badge earners to make sure they understood this is why you should care about this badge. Here's what you need to do first, like set up a LinkedIn profile, for example. And then when you earn the badge, make sure you do these three things. Publish it to your, LinkedIn profile, put it in your activity feed, those kinds of things. Automatically, the claim rates went up. And Jim, I think you've done that with clients that you literally have been able to take people that had very low claim rates and elevated them dramatically just by doing a few things.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And you have to think very specifically about the audience you're targeting as well, right? I mean, if for instance, if it's your employee ecosystem, how you message and market that is going to be different than if you're, say, have some sort of program where you're targeting an adult learner audience that's external to your organization, or maybe there's a program that's at the high school level that your organization or company is engaged with, and you're issuing badges. You have to think about that kind of persona, that type of individual, and how you meet with them. Conduits and channels that you use for message and marketing can differ between different audiences. High schoolers, you'll probably stand a better chance of meeting them through TikTok and Instagram, versus an adult learner, which LinkedIn or Facebook might be, just as an example. So yeah, it's another pretty heavy topic that can go into, but it absolutely matters. If you don't have marketing and promotion strategy in place around your program, it will suffer. So it's very important to have that strategy worked out. Number 15, support and resources. And this is a really interesting one because every client that I've ever worked with, this is never top of mind for them until we sit down and we start going through everything that they need to think about, and support workflows. How are you going to support the issuers that want to participate in the program? How are you going to support the earners, right? Um, Support and resources could include things you've mentioned. Landing pages, really important aspect of it. If you have a program that's largely internally focused, do you have some sort of central resource that has FAQs and things of this nature? I mean, it's just really, really important. And this also extends, support and resources also extends to the actual using of the platform itself. So if you're an organization that is trying to stand up something in-house from a platform standpoint, you're going to have to provide, cradle to grave support and expertise around that. If you're using a commercial platform, you get the benefit of obviously having, customer success organizations attached with those kinds of companies that are providing, those sorts of solutions to help with that as well. But hugely important.
Yeah, and I think one of the things that is part of that is feedback. We included NPS in the program, so people could give us a net promoter score on it. But you might do something as simple as every quarter or how often you want, or maybe build it into your communications plan. What do you think of the program? What can we
Yeah.
do better? Is there any friction in the program that we can remove? You want this to be frictionless.
Number 16, maintenance and updates. And this extends to a lot of things. There's maintenance and updates to the actual credentialed activities. Are you keeping those current? Right? If there are material changes to the content, say around a training activity that's being badged, what are you doing to make sure that the badge itself is updated? And there's a whole process and there's a method that can be followed to do that. It might be the actual issuing platform itself. Is it being maintained? Is it keeping pace with the evolving standards, like open badge standards, for instance, that one EdTech looks after? So digital credentialing programs are they're never static. They are never static. They're very dynamic and they're constantly evolving, and they should be. That's going to make for a much more effective program when changes are being made and updates are being made. So again, it's a very important part of the overall framework that's assembled around a digital credentialing program is to make sure there's a strategy to handle maintenance and updates.
And I think that there's a project management element to this as well. You're going to look at your badges, whether they're the versions, whether it's again back aligned to the objectives. So you're going to basically have a regular cadence of making sure that this program is always fresh and always aligned to what your stakeholders really need. And I think part of that leads into the segue, I think, Jim, to the next one, which is the monitoring of this program and the reporting.
Yeah, number 17, monitoring and analytics. You and I both know, how compelling that can be in terms of understanding the performance of a program, but also for getting additional buy-in as you move forward with the program downstream, right? If you're standing up a badging program for the sake of standing up a badging program, it's probably not going to be successful. It's not going to achieve anything really of value. You have to have the discipline to really look at what's happening with that. Everything from acceptance rates of the badges themselves, are people sharing those badges that they're earning, but also how issuing of those badges are impacting the actual activities they're attached to. So if it's online education, for instance, is what's happening with engagement rates, what's happening with completion rates and things of that nature. It's ultimately it's all part of the monitoring and feedback process, but it's looking at it from again the impact that the presence or the existence of those digital badges are having on the overall program, just motivational elements on the part of the earner and what it's doing to the programs that sit behind the badges.
You have to look beyond the badge data itself. So back to your objectives at the very beginning, your objectives probably go beyond what it is for just a learning activity. So for example, one of the things we did was we looked at people who had earned badges at IBM against some key objectives for the organization. One of them was increased sales. One of them was increased retention. We found that those people who earned certain badges increased their sales. So our technical sellers, for example, closed their quotas at a much higher rate if they had earned certain badges. We also found that the retention rate within the IBM company went up for those people who had earned badges. Now, there's correlations there. It's not necessarily causation. But the bottom line is, what are these big objectives? So look beyond your badge data to say, is this impacting other areas of the business? And that's how you're going to make your program essential within your organization.
Absolutely. And you touched on something there that's so important, I think, for particularly any employee focused or employee centric kind of badging program. One of the most valuable things you can do is find ways to combine the badging data, the issuing data, and match that up or marry that up with employee demographic data. So from a HR talent management standpoint, the kinds of insights that can open up and make available to you are just incredible. And it that's how, again, that's just one other way that you can really derive value from a digital badging program.
Yeah, I want to, one last thing on that thing. Think about this once you start building that skills cloud, you're going to be able to create all kinds of mapping on this program. One of the things that we did was we looked at, do we have enough skills in a particular geography for a certain technology? The badge information exposed gaps in that.
Number 18 is legal. And yeah, we talked about privacy and security, and there's certainly a heavy legal element associated with that. But legal considerations extend beyond data privacy and how you're dealing with, initiatives like European Union's GDPR, or maybe if it's in the U.S., for instance, California has much stricter kinds of data privacy rules, so you have to think about those things. But there are other types of legal issues, especially if you have a program where maybe you're co-badging, right? Or like in the case of IBM, where they're using routes to market to get their education out to external audiences through platforms like Coursera or edX, things of that nature. The copyright and licensing and IP, use of logos, all those kinds of things have to be taken into consideration. And this is where you want to make sure that you have someone from the legal side of your organization um, available to kind of consult with you and make sure that you don't get yourself, that you're not operating outside the, uh, legal boundaries in terms of how you're. It could be something as simple as you create a badge and you decide to place an icon in the badge, and maybe you just grabbed it off the internet somewhere, did a Google search, and went into images and you found a cool icon. That might be okay, it might not, right? It's just definitely, that's just one example of many where you need to make sure that there is sort of some legal oversight that's brought into the creation of your program and the ongoing continuing operation of it as well.
Yeah, no, I think that's an important point that you would be surprised how close your emblems may look to somebody else's emblems. We had some issues at the IBM company with some of the logos that we created for our business partner program early on, and they were very similar to another retailer's, and so we had to, change them. So, and
Yeah.
don't forget, these things don't go away.
Right, they don't. And one example I can think of is one of the issuing programs at IBM. They came forward and they wanted to create a new badge, and they wanted to use the Superman logo in it. True story, right? And very well intended, and for the particular market they were going after, it made sense, but obviously we couldn't do that, right? There's an intellectual property concern about using the Superman logo, and it just simply wasn't allowed. So you just need to have some safeguards in place, and legal is the best place, or the best way to ensure that you don't run afoul of those kinds of things. Number 19, cost and funding.
Well,
Let's do this
I'll tell you
first.
right now, one of the things you have to do is you have to build a business case. Yeah, and you have to do that up front because we list as cost and funding, but there's value that you have to show as well. This shouldn't necessarily be a cost, and that's the way a lot of people think of this. Oh, great, it's going to add more cost to my program. You're going to have to think on the front end of this, what's the value? So, for example, when we started talking earlier, we talked about increasing sales or increasing the retention. If you can increase the retention by 1 percentage point in an organization from 13% to 12% or whatever it happens to be, that's typical, right? What is the dollar value associated with that? It's tremendous. If you're able to increase the number of skills around your technology, what's the value of that? So you have to start to think about what is the business value of this and build a compelling business case. And that's how you sustain value, because if it's thought of as a cost, everybody knows costs get cut.
And there's other things too, I mean, I like your how you position this, right? There's ways that programs like digital badging and putting that in place can actually um, avoid cost within the organization. So there's what you may pay from a subscription standpoint to, take advantage of one of the commercial platforms to actually issue badges. There's the time that individual employees have to spend looking after the program and that. But there's a lot of potential payoff, right? And you mentioned some examples there, perfect ones like retention. Reducing turnover is obviously going to save a company money. There's other things too. The marketing exposure that a badging program can create for an organization is incredible. And this is something that I have to say I've never encountered a single client that had thought about this until I brought it up. And it was, hey, we have a way of actually helping you calculate what kind of dollar value that is being returned to your organization just by virtue of these badges you're issuing being shared out to destinations like LinkedIn, for example. And it's a very, very well structured process that we can, bring to bear to help clients understand that. And it can be like in the case of IBM over several years, it was several $1 million worth of social media marketing value that was returned back to the companies simply by individual credential earners sharing their badges out to social media. I mean, how fantastic, is that to get that kind of brand exposure, not just brand exposure, but also exposure around specific programs, particularly those that are targeted include audiences that are external to the organization. So, number 20, standards and interoperability. And I touched on interoperability earlier, but that really ties more specifically to standards. And when we talk standards, what we're really talking about here is open badge standards, the one ed tech standards. And you'll see a URL if you want to really get into understanding the open badge standards. You can go to one ed tech's website and have a look at what's documented there. It's really important that whatever any program that's put together using badges, that it adhere to standards. I mean, that's going to ensure that the data is capable of being machine readable. There's so many other things that come into play there. You probably have some comments as well, David.
Well, I mean, I think we all feel frustrated when we use different technologies, whether it's our smartphones or our computers, that how many cables and how many tips
Yeah.
on cables do we need to have? So, I mean, obviously that inhibits a lot by not having a standard right there. And so, again, back to the interoperability, if you really want to have the ability to expand the value of your program, it needs to be able to be ported from higher education to industry associations. You need to have equivalence. All of these things require having a single standard. And I think it's not hard to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And related to that, number 21 is badge portability. And, as we were talking about standards and interoperability, that relates directly to, can you actually push this new credential that you've earned around and share it? We talked about sharing, for instance, and there's literally standards built into that are part of the open badges standards that deal specifically with the portability of these credentials, which is hugely important, right? If you have a digital credentialing program in place and people are earning these badges, they need to be able to use them in some way, right? And to use them, they have to be able to move them around. And I think that that's really important. To be able to showcase what they've achieved out in their LinkedIn profile, for instance, or maybe they have some other portfolio that they want to share it on, or maybe somebody has their own personal website and they want to put that information out there as well.
We found that by issuing badges for different activities, existing activities, dramatically increase the uptake of those activities and the completion of those activities. And it's for one reason, is because that information is not just sitting in a learning management system. It's now a personal record. It's part of a personal portfolio. So encourage people, not only allow them to do it, but encourage them to share them on LinkedIn, share them with their friends, put them on their signatures, in their emails, whatever it takes to make these badges more personal for them.
Number 22 is evaluation and review. This is in some ways related to monitoring and analytics. But are you taking the time within your program to go out and connect with your badge earners, for instance, to get their point of view on, hey, is do you like the way, do you like these credentials? How are you using them? Sometimes you've got to go out and you've got to ask those audiences specific questions to understand if what you're trying to achieve is actually being achieved from the perspective of the individuals that are actually earning these. So maybe it's an NPS program, Net Promoter Score program, that's being run on a periodic basis, to get sentiment from those different audiences on how they feel about earning badges from your organization. That would be one example.
And don't make any assumptions on this. For example, there were some badges that we saw that had very low claim rates. And immediately you think, well, maybe it's the underlying activity, which oftentimes it is, right? The underlying activity is not what people like. But maybe it's a fact that they really don't know what they should do with that badge. So, for example, some groups just simply didn't realize the value of it. If we went back, like Jim, you did with some groups, and marketed back to them, here's why you need to claim that. All of a sudden, the claim rates go up. There was nothing wrong with the activity.
Right.
There's nothing wrong with the badge. It was simply a marketing activity that hadn't taken place.
Yeah, it's a great way, to be informed and have greater insight in terms of what's working and what's not, and but more specifically, what actions you might need to go take to make corrections. And there will be corrections that have to be made. No program is ever launched, no digital badging program is ever launched and managed and just works perfectly all the time. There's constant care and feeding, and you have to constantly be measuring and evaluating, and talking to people and surveying and things of that nature. And as a result of all of that and all of that input that comes in, your program will evolve accordingly. And you mentioned this earlier, comes to 23, and that's user feedback integration.
Well, yeah, and I think that back to the user feedback on this, I think from from everybody, but from an earner perspective, again, you can use NPS and you can use some of these other things to do it. But here's the deal: when you're within an organization, especially a large organization, you're going to have a lot of different opinions. Don't be bristled by these different opinions. And I think that we early on realized that this program is going to pivot, it's going to change, it's going to need to adapt to the needs of the stakeholders. So it's not your baby, and sometimes it feels like it is your baby. But make sure that you're always open to this feedback and always open to pivot. You might pivot dramatically from where you started.
I mean, I will say, I think, in our experience at IBM, that program probably pivoted in a substantial way 3 different times, right? And a lot of that was based on user feedback, right? And just evaluating what those who were engaging with the program. And some of that was just, over the years, the understanding of and the use of digital credentials sort of evolved. And so some of those changes needed to be made just by virtue of how, the technology and the whole concept of digital credentialing was evolving. But as new programs were stood up and being badged at IBM and kind of expanding the scope of how IBM, um, applies digital credentialing, it opened up the overall program to other kinds of opportunities that were greenfield. And if, to really understand if things are working the way that you intended them to work, and then that it's being received in the right way, you have to be collecting that user feedback. And again, it kind of segues into number 24, which is scalability and growth. Obviously, all of these things you're doing, monitoring and analytics, evaluation and review, collecting user feedback, all of that can be used as a way to inform how you scale and grow your program. And that certainly has been our experience.
Yeah, and you have to architect it from the front end like that. You have to think about that from the front end. We have coached a lot of people on how to create scalable programs. Some people don't take our advice and they run into problems. In fact, there was one major organization that didn't take our advice. They went down a different path with how they structure. Not for we often structure it. There's knowledge, there are skills, there might be true capabilities, and then there might be other different types of activities, whether they be, uh, I don't know, corporate social responsibility programs and things like that.
Yeah.
And that scales. That scales to, and we learned it scaled to hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of thousands, millions of people at IBM. But think about what your structure is going to be of this thing up front, because once you lock it in, it's like building a house. You have to make sure that you put the bathrooms and the living room and the kitchen and everything else. Otherwise, you're going to say, wait a minute, we didn't put enough bathrooms in here.
Right. And, your comment about corporate social responsibility, that's a perfect segue into number 25. And the last one on our list here is ethical considerations, right? Does your badging program, does it reflect the value and ethics that, exist within your organization, within your company, or maybe you're an education institution, right? Because it should. There are certainly lots and lots of opportunities. Corporate social responsibility programs are fantastic opportunities where you can bring digital credentialing to. Maybe you have a volunteer program or something, within your organization, and you want to be able to recognize people that have put skin in the game, and uh, extended their personal time to the benefit of some program that the organization is sponsoring in your local community. There's a terrific badging opportunity there. And not only to kind of motivate people to get involved in these, corporate social responsibility kind of programs, but also to reflect how your organization and how your company, feels from and operates from a ethics and a value standpoint. So I think that, again, all of the really high impact programs that I've seen have that component as part of their program, and I think it's a really easy one to do, by the way, and it can be really effective, again, for brand building and brand awareness, and getting adding additional credibility into your program.
And it can even be expressed in the badge design and even the name of your badge. Make sure that the badge name is correct and it's accurate. If it, make sure that it's not used to just try to get people attracted to it. If you're doing foundational level information, if somebody's learning foundational information about, cloud technology, don't write that it's a cloud architect, right? Or something else,
Right.
right? Make
Exactly.
sure that you're
Exactly.
really clear and descriptive so you can build trust and be ethical.
Yeah, that's a really good point you made. You don't want to fall into the trap of overstating or making unsupportable claims, right? Within a badged activity. And I've seen that. I've seen that come through, and I've had to kind of call people out for maybe how a description was written, something along those lines, because it was an overstatement, or maybe it was an activity that they said, we want this to be at the intermediate or at the advanced level, but it really didn't rise to that level of achievement. And again, this is where governance comes into play, and there's a whole lot of elements that um, around governance that can help prevent these kinds of things happening. But again, all part of ethical considerations. So there we go. 25 secrets of successful digital credentialing. David, do you have
Yeah, no, I
any
was going to
other?
say, and then so thank you for watching and listening. And Jim has prepared a cheat sheet for you as well. So there's a downloadable cheat sheet that'll be attached to this.
That'll be available for you. And of course, again, if any of these topics resonate with you and you want to learn more, we do have the master class, and that's over 10 hours of training. And any one of these topics that we've talked about here are covered much more deeply within that master class. And we also provide consulting and coaching for organizations that, even if you have an existing credentialing program and you're just looking, you feel like that there are opportunities to make it better, but you're just not quite sure how to get started. That's something that we can assist with as well. So give us a shout and let us know if we can help. And we hope that this was helpful for you. And we'll see you again down the road in another webcast.
Are you looking to launch a digital badging program or improve an existing one? Look no further than Digital Badge Academy. Our highly popular online masterclass will help you gain the skills and insights necessary to achieve success. Enroll now and start learning today.